Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Welcome to the Open Door. Jim Hannock and Matthew Bartko here with friends John Breen and Christy Owl. We'll begin with a prayer, the Veni Sancte Spiritus. Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful, and kindle in them the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit, and they shall be created, and you will renew the face of the earth. Let us pray. Lord, by the light of the Holy Spirit, you have taught the hearts of your faithful. In the same Spirit, help us to relish what is right and always rejoice in your consolation. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. We'll be looking, of course, at the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, and we'll be considering as well some of the events going on within the American Solidarity Party. But I'd like to begin with some questions, and I'll pose them for Christy Yao and Matthew on the Rehumanize International. If it's not international, it should be, and I suspect that it is, the Rehumanize Association and its recent conference. Christy, you were there. What can you tell us?
Sure. So it actually is international. I got to go to Ireland last May to try to vote no on, well, not me voting, but to try to encourage people to vote no on the referendum that unfortunately legalized abortion. So very international. But it was a great conference. I got to meet people from all over the country. We had kind of a diverse group of panelists. We had lots of attendees, lots of great topics were covered.
What makes Rehumanize special, distinctive, with regard to other pro-life groups, some of them perhaps long established?
Sure. So Rehumanize was really started to kind of give a place for people who felt like they didn't really fit in with the pro-life movement. Our founder, Amy Murphy, kind of saw herself as a kind of feminist, young, part of the LGBT community, pro-lifer, and she really didn't feel like she had a home. And we also try to be consistent in our approach to pro-life issues. So all the topics weren't just on abortion, though many were focused because it is such a great injustice. But I went to a talk on Guantanamo Bay. I heard a talk from a former death row inmate. There are all sorts of topics covered.
Matthew, you were there too. What were some of the highlights?
I honestly think, and this is me being a partisan hack, that the best part of the conference for me was the people who came up with questions about the American Solidarity Party. I had a gentleman start the conversation with saying he didn't believe in the Solidarity Party. He believed in the values of the GOP. And we talked about what those values were. And at the end of the conversation, he signed up for the party. I spoke with a woman who was very upset with the party's stance on LGBTQ plus issues. And, I was able to empathize from her perspective on that, but assured her that the party does hold the human rights of all humans in very high regard, including the people in the LGBTQ plus community. And it was a very productive conversation. I also really enjoyed a session I went to on engaging communities of faith with a whole life ethic. And one about bringing the whole life ethic into politics, I thought was also particularly enjoyable, if far too short.
John Breen, if you had been at such a conference, what questions might you have raised?
Well, probably the usual. Well, when I first got onto the show, like almost a year from this month, we went over the planks of the American Solidarity Party, and I had a few issues with a few of the planks, and among them was the lack of mentioning gun control, and that's kind of a big thing for me. Of course, pro-life issues, would trump gun issues as well, but I think the two go hand to hand, and I think that that's an important facet. Really, it's an important issue that I don't think it's a good idea for the party to not comment on it or to have that included in their planks. So that would be the one of the things that I would bring up.
Could rehumanize, Christy and Matthew, of course. Could rehumanize have anything to say that would fit with its vision, that would bear on gun control issues?
We actually don't take a stance on gun control issues. Sorry.
I think that rehumanize, much like the American Solidarity Party and a couple other places that are trying to appeal to broad audiences, are very hesitant to comment on very emotionally charged issues that aren't directly life issues. Next to abortion, I can't think of any more divisive issue in this country than the Second Amendment rights of citizens and how those are appropriately exercised in modern society. So I think a lot of organizations from Consistent Life, which I'm a huge fan of, Rehumanize, certainly the ASP, I'm a big fan. I really can't think of any of them that take overt stances on how the Second Amendment should be carried out. I'm just curious if any of you know of an organization that is promoting the whole life ethic, anti-euthanasia, anti-death penalty, anti-abortion, anti-unjust war, that then goes on and does take a strong stance on the Second Amendment. I'd love to read up on that if there are any.
That's a good question to raise. Christy and Matthew, of course, as well. When there's a meeting, a conference, and the conference aims to reach a wide range of people, it's oftentimes said, perhaps informally, that so-and-so represents the such-and-such community, or so-and-so comes to us from the such-and-such community. I've always wondered about that rather free use of the word community. Sometimes it seems to me that what people refer to as a community is really pretty much of a demographic. It's a way of picking out a certain range of people. But were you to get all those people together, I think you would find a great many disagreements among them on a great many different issues. And so I wonder if the word community is sometimes used in an overly elastic way. Well, any thoughts on that observation?
I think distinguish the main kind of difference between a community, a demographic, is a community has some kind of emotional bond, usually some kind of struggle. I went to one session on disability rights, and although the people who were on that panel, it was like a forum kind of panel type of session, and although they had different experiences, they had the same struggles, they had the same oppressions that they could bond over. Although there are many differences between people, the beliefs of people who do have disabilities, the right way to tackle certain issues, for example.
So one example I would throw out is due to various handicaps and injuries I've had, I fall into the demographic of people who have had brain injuries. But for the first, I want to say, 8 years of my life where I fit that demographic, I did not belong to that community because I did not engage with others who fit that demographic. So I think that when you appropriately apply the label community, you're taking it a step beyond saying just someone fits in this category and saying it's someone who participates with others who might fit in that category and relates to them and builds culture with them. And that's what forms community, not just the descriptive attribute that would equal the demographic, but the participation and the generation of shared culture. Does that sound right, Jim?
Well, that's a help. It's certainly more than census divisions and that sort of thing.
Correct.
And no doubt emotional bonding is a necessary condition to speak about a community. But it seems like there's still more than that. For example, I can imagine, and maybe it's because I watch too many television shows. Come to think of it, watching one is one too many. But at any rate, what about the Brotherhood of Thieves and its various manifestations? I'm sure if I wanted to get into counterfeiting, I'd probably want to begin with $20 bills. I'm sure there's a group of people here in Los Angeles that know a good deal about counterfeiting because they're counterfeiters. And I imagine a number of these counterfeiters have a certain bond and alert each other to various legal threats that they might be facing. And some of them might be multi-generational, father, son, grandfather, grandson. And we could talk about a community of counterfeiters, and I'm sure that a number of the cartels in Mexico have all sorts of effective bonds within themselves. But we'd want more than that in order to call them a community, wouldn't we?
I'm a little concerned that you're going to pejorative cases, but beyond that, no, I don't think we would. I think if I were to hearken back to my more stringent academic days,
those glory days, the halcyon days of yore, salad days. Go ahead.
My geography professor would be very particular in the definition of community being something with geographic constraints, because it's used in that area of study as a more technical term. However, I believe when we're dealing in an age of mass communication and social media, it is just simply more efficient to use the colloquial sense, the sense in which community has come to be used, which, I would throw out the perhaps lame definition of a group of people with shared interests that generate shared culture and community. So it's the generation of community by creating that culture with that interaction. The crux of community is the interactions.
Well, let me push on that. I mentioned the pejorative examples because I think if we're going to use the word community in a rich way, we ought to take into account that these individuals who have come together, who have developed shared bonds and the like, are in fact pursuing a good, and that they take that good to be a common good. And that means that when we have a representative from this community or that community or some other community, it's fair to ask, well, what is it that's the good that you pursue, and how is it a common good rather than some sort of counterfeit? After all, there are all sorts of counterfeit goods in this culture, this oftentimes toxic culture of ours. For one other example, and then I might stop with the examples. Again and again, I see references to the intelligence community, referring to what? Various spy agencies. And I'm sure they have a certain sisterhood and brotherhood among them, but the whole thing is built on a commitment to tell lies. So when I see the word community, I always want to scratch at it a little bit and see what's underneath there.
I think you might be suffering from a little bit of well-wishing in your definition of community that isn't strictly there in the historical use of the word.
Well, that may be, and if it's not there, maybe we need to think about salvaging community as something that's as positive and is ordered to a good, rather than leaving it in a kind of a limbo where we could have we hear this expression, honor among thieves, and whether there is such a thing or not. If there were such a thing as honor among thieves, they'd still be thieves. However, I'm glad there's Rehumanize International. I'm certainly glad it's international, and I'm certainly glad it's reaching out to, maybe we could split the difference, a wide range of constituencies, because we need to reach everyone that we can reach with the pro-life for the whole of life message.
They used to be known as, I'm blanking on it now, a Life Matters Journal. That started off as a publication, the Life Matters Journal. And I think when they adopted the name Rehumanize, it really was with the goal of getting people to just do that, to remember the humanity of the subject matter they were dealing with.
Yes.
To remember themselves as humans dealing with that subject matter, and
yes.
to really rehumanize humanity. So I think their target audience is, humans alive on Earth today,
yes.
remembering that they're humans and engaging in these matters of social justice and these matters of life as humans dealing with other humans and dealing with policies that affect other humans. So that's something that is worthy of note in my book when discussing that particular community, that particular organization, I should say.
Yes, and that's certainly the case when humans are regularly turned into commodities, and we have so many structures that dehumanize. I'm all for rehumanizing. I would say that whatever its shortcomings, the United Nations Declaration on Universal Human Rights is a document that seeks to rehumanize. And we're coming fairly close to the end of our discussion of it, but we still have 2 more articles to consider. And I wonder, Matthew, if you could get us focused on the next to last article.
I certainly can, although I'm wondering what those last 2 articles were. I'm pretty sure this is our last week for this. We covered Article 30 back on week 1. And this is Article 29 we're in today.
Well, we've then recovered the last article. We've recovered it. Well, that was easy enough. Shows you what you get when you prepare ahead. And so now we come to our ultimate, albeit penultimate, Article 29. Take us forward.
I'll read it over once just for our audience who I do not take for granted that they do their required readings.
What?
Article 29, everyone has duties to the community in which alone the free and full development of his personality is possible. In the exercise of his rights and freedoms, everyone shall be subject only to such limitations as are determined by law solely for the purpose of securing due recognition and respect for the rights and freedoms of others, and meeting the just requirements of morality, public order, and the general welfare in a democratic society. These rights and freedoms may in no case be exercised contrary to the purpose and principles of the United Nations. That is maybe one of the heaviest articles that we have dealt with so far as not just protecting rights to individuals, but requiring responsibilities and actions from them. John, could you take a crack at expounding the first part of Article 29?
Sure. So with this one, when I first read it, I I noted, I kind of thought back to what my comments last week, where where I quoted Aristotle saying that man is a social animal, and it seemed, to me, this article, the first part of it, is almost a balance between man in community with others, and also the man as an individual. So it's a balance between the two. So you're an individual, meaning that you are unlike other people. But you're still made in the image and likeness of God. But you still have this individuality about you that makes you different from everyone else. But at the same time, you live in a community with everybody else. So you're not complete. You cannot be completely autonomous and still be human. So so just to recap, I think that the first part is striking a balance between the two, that your individuality and in your living in community with others, that the two don't clash. They go together. They complement each other.
And Christy, what is your take? What kind of duties do you think people have to the communities that they live in?
Sure. So I was doing some research on this because it was a little heavy. And I came across a video of these kids knocking on their neighbors' doors and reading them their human rights. So that was kind of and they were like, Article 29, responsibility. So that took it from the perspective of kind of it's our duty to educate people and to empower people, and not really to give a man a fish, but to teach a man to fish, or woman. And yeah, so and I think that's where we come into some conflict, where it's this fine line of how much is my duty, how much is overboard, how much is underboard.
I know personally, I like to look at all the freedoms and rights given in this declaration. And I would say it's our duty, it's collectively our duty, but also it's each of our individual duties to ensure these rights are protected for our families and our neighbors. I think keeping all these human rights require a human effort for them to be protected and provided for. Jim, how do you weigh in on this first section of the article?
I guess I'd like to, in order to add something, connect with John's point. We have this core idea in Aristotle, that apart from the community, the Greek word there would be polis, from which we have our word politics. Apart from that, we can't flourish as the individuals we are. And I'd like to give another kind of philosophical source for this idea of community that makes it possible for individuals to develop and be fully persons. A lot of us, in one way or another, in one form or another, have heard of autonomy as being the pivotal value. And I think that there are probably a whole lot of commencement speeches that emphasize autonomy. The world is yours. Go ahead and become who you fully are. And in a very different setting, in hospital care, we talk about patients' rights and what's the right. It's the right of autonomy to make the decision that the individual wants to make, which might be, say, suicide. But this whole notion of autonomy, which literally means self-rule or giving oneself one's own law, has to be contextualized if it's to make any sense at all. I want to give an example from philosophy. A lot of people think that, and there's reason to think this, what we call modern philosophy begins with René Descartes. So think 1600s France. And what Descartes is most famous for, if you go to a cocktail party at any rate, is I think, therefore I am. I think, therefore I am. And for Descartes, if you're going to think in any clear way, well, you're going to think in a way that parallels mathematics. And how does mathematics or geometry, how do they work? Well, they work because we have clear and distinct ideas. A square is a square, a circle is a circle. A rational number is not an irrational number, and the like. So Descartes said if we want to make any progress, we have to begin on our own, and we have to use all and only clear and distinct ideas, and then we have to build up from those clear and distinct ideas, using where we can immediate sense impressions. And this is the only way to have knowledge, real knowledge. And all of this, Descartes told us without ever questioning that the words he was using are words that come from a language, and that he, Descartes, did not invent the language, nor did any one individual invent the language. That rather the language in which Descartes thought and in which he wrote, by the way, it started with Latin, then was quickly translated to French, that language was itself a social product. And not only is language a social product, but what we take to be reasoning is a social product. It's not like you and I are dispersed to our various islands and we do a Robinson Crusoe number. Even Robinson Crusoe took with him a technology that had been developed in a community, and of course took with him a language which he used to keep a diary that had come from a community. What's the takeaway from this? Human life as we know it just doesn't work without community. And that's certainly going to be the case in the political and ethical sphere. So I see the United Nations Declaration at this point making a point that is too often forgotten. And when it's forgotten, what happens is we go from a community to a mob, or we go from a community to authoritarian rule of powerful individuals.
So you would reject the myth of Romulus and Remus, that some of us at least were raised by wolves and invented Rome on our own.
Well, I would just say there are many ways to read a myth, and Romulus and Remus might well have been raised by the wolves, but the wolves themselves were proto-socialized, and Romulus and Remus were not the sons of wolves. They were the sons of human beings, and human beings come together to form a culture. And at the very core of human life is our sexuality, which gives rise to new life.
And so I just want to, Terry, perhaps on this first section of this article, mainly because I think it is the most likely to be overlooked. It's easy for us to wax poetic in American culture about the benefits of community, about the rights of community, about the rights of individuals, about the obligations communities have to individuals. But I just think that it is special that it made it into this declaration to acknowledge that we have duties to the community. And I think that's everything from we are obliged to pay our taxes. We are in some communities obliged to cut our grass to a certain height. And that goes even beyond, our obligations to not punch police officers, or our obligation to refrain from evils. We are required to do positive, to commit actions and do labor on behalf of our communities. Christy, what are some areas that you see as obligations of ways that people should be proactively serving their communities as one of these duties that might fall under Article 29?
Sure. So I think it really, well, obviously you said paying taxes in some communities, cutting grass, all that. I think it also depends on where you're at and kind of what stage of life you are in a community. I think if you have children, you do have a duty to kind of interact and engage with them, with the community. If you're older, maybe your job is to not go out and pick up trash on a Saturday morning, but perhaps you can engage in your community in another way. So there's a variety of different outlets, I guess, and not one person has to do everything, but everyone has to do something.
Excellent. And John, do you have any examples that come to your mind?
Yeah, actually. And the example is me to a certain extent. I recently became a volunteer firefighter for the village that is right down the street from where I live. So it's a volunteer thing. You're only paid on call, but when the calls come in for fire or for accidents, the alarm goes off. There's an app on your phone, or you carry a pager, and you have to go down to the station, get your gear on, jump on the fire truck, and then you're out. So that's one example that I'm doing, and it's in the fire department is made up of just guys, local people. They're guys with families and with jobs. So they're not able to be down there for every single call, but they make as many calls as they can, and we all meet once a week for a training period. So that's an active way. That's a way of being active in the community.
I'm a big fan of a certain dichotomy of looking at things. I like to say that the government is the provider of last resort. In other words, if we, as individuals, charities, organizations, or corporations, perfectly take care of our elderly population, then there is no need for the government to take care of our elderly population. But if we, at lower levels of order, neglect to do those services, then the government, is obliged in a moral society to step in and take care of those individuals. It sounds like you're doing your part to take care of the safety of the community on a voluntary basis, which, whether we participate in that through paying taxes or through volunteer hours, I wholeheartedly agree that our communities must, take care of their individual members that way. Moving on a little bit, in the exercise of his rights and freedoms, everyone shall be subject only to such limitations as are determined by law, solely for the purpose of securing due recognition and the respect for rights and freedoms of others, and meeting the just requirements of morality, public order, and the general welfare of a democratic society. Am I correct in reading that to say that we can't pass a law to build golden statues of our leaders? Is it saying that all laws and all exercises of freedoms should only be toward those purposes? Go ahead, Jim.
Now, tell me about this implication that you've just drawn. I think it's something to savor.
It looks to me, and I'm interested in the panel's response to this as well, that it's saying that the only right exercises of legal force or of really the exercises of our collective activity are securing the due recognition and respect for the rights and freedoms of others, the meeting of the just requirements of morality, the public order of society, and the general welfare of a democratic society. Am I reading that part of the article correctly as far as you can tell, Jim?
Now, the general welfare in a democratic society might include all sorts of things. For example, it might require a kind of civic feeling, shared civic feeling. And that shared civic feeling might be enhanced by public works and public statuary and the like. So I suppose that's a sort of a carte blanche for a lot of different proposals about whose statue should be at the front of the city hall. But maybe I'm misreading where you were heading.
Alrighty, Jim. I guess you still get to have your golden statue.
Well, I don't think there's any movement afoot in that area.
John,
maybe John should say something here.
What's your takeaway for the second section?
John's the sort of guy who can jump on a fire truck, unlike Matthew and yours unruly. I don't know if Christy would give it a shot or not. So if you can jump on a fire truck, what the heck? There might be a statue in order.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because when you first read the line that that in the exercise of rights and freedoms, everyone shall be subject only to such limitations. That is just some red flags there, because of being subject only to such limitations.
We're losing you, John.
Like we're losing John. I'll give Kristen the opportunity to defend her honor and her willingness to jump on fire trucks.
Go for it.
Also, comment on where we've gone so far with the article.
Well, actually, my dad's a volunteer EMT, so I have spent many, many hours around fire trucks and fire stations. So.
Aha! The background. And you don't even own a Dalmatian.
I do not, but I was a firehouse brat, I have to say, like an army brat, but better. Oh, when I read the second part, it screamed into my brain the principle of subsidiarity. I went back to my 11th grade Catholic school moral and ethics class, and that's something I've kind of struggled with, I guess, as someone who generally leans more to the left and who generally leans more into the whole social safety net, the whole kind of fact that my religion's kind of teaching and government is based on having the least and having the most community-oriented government possible. That's been something I've really spent a good deal of time thinking about, but I think it is true. And the 29th article really states it pretty clearly in here that we should not have, an extreme example would be in North Korea, where there are certain hairstyles you can wear. We shouldn't have that. We should have the freedom to do what we want to do, as long as
it looks like you may have temporarily gone mute.
Sorry, I got a spam call, but someone's trying to intercept the show, I guess.
Oh, millions are, but they don't succeed. Facilitate it.
So, for the sake of, I realize this is a Catholic radio station, or at least that's where its funding comes from. For the sake of any of our guests that may not know, would you care to throw out a definition for subsidiarity?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. It's doing basically the least amount of government as possible and the most grassroots and community-oriented as possible. And of course, there are millions of interpretations and millions of opinions about what that should be. If you were to ask me, I would say that subsidiarity is not, we don't need to do a dramatic reduction of what the government is kind of doing. If you asked another kind of Catholic social teaching student, they might say, we need to do away with public schools. We need to do away with this and that and that. But a variety of different beliefs.
The definition I heard that I liked the most, and I've heard many definitions that I didn't like at all, but the definition of subsidiarity I liked the most was that the most local authority that can efficiently handle a problem should. And my criticism of the ones that I dislike the most is that they seem to leave off that efficiently part of it. But I think this is a worthwhile topic for the show to address. So, John, can you give us a definition of subsidiarity as far as you understand it?
Sure. The way I've understood it was that it's dealing with issues at the lowest possible as possible. Dealing with things at the local level and only going up to the higher level when the local levels have been exhausted. So it's respecting both the higher authorities and local authorities, but it's dealing with things mostly at the grassroots level and only going up as the need arises.
Thanks, John. And if our professorial co-host would mind giving us his operational definition of subsidiarity. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, my operational definition is just the same as yours, Matthew. Let me, though, give a couple of anecdotes. One is very local and very current about how subsidiarity can be used properly to shame higher levels into action. Here in Los Angeles, there's a well-known fellow named Joe the Volunteer. And what Joe the Volunteer does is go around to different parts of the city, and he has his sign, Joe the Volunteer. And what he does is he picks up trash. And in just about any part of the city that isn't gated, there's a lot of trash to pick up. And Joe the Volunteer, I think, over the years has inspired a lot of people to pick up trash. And this isn't to say that there shouldn't be any trash services. There should be trash pickup services. There aren't enough of them. They're not doing what they should do. Now, here's a historical anecdote. It's not something going on now, and it's not something that went on in Los Angeles, but it's something that Dorothy Day oftentimes celebrated in her talks and in the pages of the Catholic Worker. There was a fellow named Danilo Dolci, D-O-L-C-I, most active in Sicily in the post-World War II years. And what was a problem there is a problem in other places today. There weren't very many good roads. And of course, there was money to be had in Sicily, but the mafia had the money, not the government. And what happened is these roads that weren't very good were getting worse and worse. So what Danilo Dolci did was to organize crews of people to fix up the roads. And they did it in their free time, and it showed the wrong-headedness of the Sicilian political economic structure in a very effective way. Now, it's not to say that Joe the Volunteer can replace the trash services, nor could Danilo Dolci take care of the transportation system of Sicily. But oftentimes when we talk about taking things into our own hands, we can take things into our own hands in a very creative way and in a way that reflects subsidiarity. And I think people who haven't heard of the principle of subsidiarity at all, ever, are oftentimes very familiar with the idea of grassroots organizing. And I think that is a reflection of the theme of subsidiarity.
I think one of the biggest failures of subsidiarity that we have in our culture today is we have a very good understanding of the federal government, and we have a very good understanding of the state governments. But we generally have local governments that are reliable back to the states for their charters. In other words, the federal government does as it pleases, and the state governments largely do as they please, but the local municipality governments and city governments have to go to the states and say, "Mother, may I?"
Well, Well, we have a man running for mayor. We, the American Solidarity Party, have a man running for mayor in the city of Inkster, Michigan. So let's hope that message will get stated in an effective way there.
Excellent. Let's hope so. I saw his campaign announcement, and it's exciting. I'm hoping to see many more of those as we get into 2019. It's one of my disappointments that we weren't able to muster more candidates for this November, but we're not going to let that hold us back moving forward. I do want to, before we go fully into ASP news, hit the last part of Article 29, which will be the last section of our talk here on the United Nations, unless we decide to come back for a more general visit. And it reads, "These rights and freedoms may in no case be exercised contrary to the purposes and principles of the United Nations." And I think that if they had left it at principles, I would have been completely okay. But the fact that they put in purposes makes this one of my least favorite sentences in these all of these articles. Just because the UN can purpose quite contrary to some of these rights sometimes, it would seem. But what were your thoughts on that, John?
Basically, that all the articles that we've covered, even though they're all individual, they're interdependent. So basically, the articles cannot contradict each other. That they all work together to build this foundation, and that it's a common ground of decency of rights and liberties that everyone, no matter where you are in the world, your race, color, creed, that you're entitled to certain rights and liberties. So when they say contrary, that's the way I'm interpreting it, that they're all interdependent and they cannot be used to contradict each other.
What are your thoughts there, Christy?
Sure. So when I was doing some research, because again, this was kind of dense, I came across kind of a UN Human Rights for Kids, and it actually helped me a lot to see what this was all about. And it explains the third part of the article as not using your freedom to go against someone else's freedom. And I think this is so crucial in laws as simple as kind of pollution, or littering rather, not dropping my chip bag because no one else wants, my garbage on their front lawn, to things as grave as abortion, not destroying another human life so I can have my bodily autonomy.
Wonderfully put, Christy.
Yes.
And Jim, what is your take on this last section?
Well, as always, words on paper, wonderful though they are, need to be interpreted by living human beings. And one of the things maybe that you had in mind is, and speaking of the purposes of the United Nations, it sometimes seems that the purposes of the United Nations is a function of the great powers of the United Nations choices for what the United Nations should be doing here and now. And so when we talk about purposes and principles, we're always in the end talking about what human beings make of those purposes and principles. There's no document that takes away our individual responsibility to act well and to think clearly. I would like to just briefly go back to number 2, because the point I want to make has to do with how things fit together or don't. In 2, we see, in the exercise of his rights and freedoms, everyone shall be subject only to such limitations as are determined by law solely for purpose of securing of securing due recognition and respect for the rights and freedoms of others. As this stands,
Can everyone hear Jim? It seems like he dropped.
Yeah, I don't hear him.
Okay. Well,
the person apart from with other people. So, for example, I don't see anything in this that would give any government the right to restrict suicide. And nonetheless, suicide should be restricted. It's a self-destructive action. And I would like to add that even though suicide in one sense can be seen as wholly self-regarding, what difference does it make? It's my choice what I do with my life. In fact, it's really not just my life, because my life affects everybody else's life. No man is an island, right? But the whole notion of the law having a legitimate sphere in terms of the perfection and the development of the person, and not just the law having its rightful sphere in preventing the violation on the part of the person of the rights of other people. And again, this does connect with autonomy, because somebody with an exaggerated sense of autonomy could say, I can do with my life whatever I want to do with my life if I do not directly impinge on your life. And actually, this isn't Aristotle. This is John Stuart Mill. And I think it's a case of clarification being necessary in order to make number two really do what it's supposed to do. But that's probably a sidebar, more than a sidebar than we need at this point. And we only have maybe, 8 or 9 minutes left, so maybe we should switch over to the American Solidarity Party and what's going on.
go for it, Jim. Do you have any updates?
Well, I do have one update. Come November 10th, mark your calendars if you're in California, we have the state convention for the American Solidarity Party of California. And I don't know who remembers Johnny Carson and all of that, different era altogether, but it's going to be in sunny downtown, not Burbank, but sunny downtown? Visalia, Central Valley. And it's going to be a day long, well, I don't want to exaggerate, an afternoon long meeting of people who have been working hard for the American Solidarity Party in California. And you might wonder, why Visalia? Well, Visalia is the stomping grounds of Devin Nunes. Hiss, boo. And more importantly, it's the stomping ground of Brian T. Carroll, perhaps our most successful candidate so far. Central Valley is the sort of place that a whole lot of people who take themselves to be rugged individualists are apt to be operating, but it's also a place that has suffered hard times, and it's all about agriculture. And agriculture as such has come to be hideously distorted. We read again and again and again about the amazing productivity of American farmers, but what we don't read about is how the vast majority of American farmers are no longer farmers because of the development and the tyranny of agribusiness. At any rate, we're going to be there in Visalia talking about how we might do a better, more coherent job in developing the party in California. But there's also been, I don't know, they decided to go broad-based, a kind of Midwest regional meeting, right, of the Solidarity Party. Matthew?
That actually happened last weekend.
Yeah. So how did that work?
Well, I'm disappointed that I wasn't able to attend. I was tabling for the ASP at the Rehumanize conference instead, as we discussed at the beginning of the show. But I understand the 2012, I believe it was, presidential candidate for the party, Joe Schreiner, was there and speaking. And we also, as you mentioned earlier, had Mr. Phillips announce his candidacy for mayor of Inkster, along with a few national committee members giving speeches on various areas of interest from our platform. And
trade was one, wasn't it?
Pardon? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Jim. So, from what I've heard, it was a very positive meeting. Christy, have you seen any coverage from that?
I have seen some pictures on Facebook. I haven't looked too much into what's been happening, but they look like they had a really good time.
There was one really bald guy there. Nobody wants to say anything about that.
That's all you, Jim. That's all you.
Well, I recognize him from our barber shop. We go to the same barber. I mean, the bald guy. Matthew,
we have a...
Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say real quick, we have a conference coming up in Maryland. We're co-sponsoring 2 Minutes to Midnight, what we can do to prevent nuclear war, on Saturday, November 17th at Goucher College. So.
Now, how do you set up these co-sponsorships, Christy?
I was reached out to by the president of the Consistent Life Network. So
you didn't have to put it together. They came looking for an American Solidarity person.
Yes, and they found me. So.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I am eager to see the continued cooperation with the Consistent Life Network. I know that we spoke at their last national conference, and I believe, Christy, you actually spoke at their vigil in front of the White House the last time it happened. Is that correct?
I did. I've spoken there a few times, so not always for the ASP. One time, I believe it was for Rehumanize. I think I've done it twice for the ASP.
We thank you for that service. I know that for those of you who have been sitting on the fences, looking in at the ASP, wondering when is the right time to join, I would say that time is now. I know that some states, as Jim was mentioning, are planning their conventions in which they will be deciding who will be the leaders way to start in their state organizations. And in a radio show where we talked about subsidiarity, getting involved in your local and state chapters is certainly the best way to start getting involved with the American Solidarity Party. So if you haven't done that, I would encourage you to do so. Financial contributions, are wonderful, and we certainly need more. But I would say much more valuable to us at this stage of our development are the contributions of time. And so I thank people like Jim and like Christy for putting in the amounts of time that they have so far. And that, as far as I know, we are going to continue to appreciate them for doing so.
Well, also, we have not official members, but friends of the party, FOPs. No, friends of the party, like John Breen, who's put in a lot of time getting us to clarify our ideas. And I just await the day when John proudly announces that he's joined our motley crew. He's willing to wait, though, I can tell.
We'll see what happens, yeah.
Honest as always. All right. I think we've come to the last minute, so I'd like to close with a prayer. It's often seen as a penitential psalm, Psalm 130, De Profundis. We have a lot to do penance for. Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my supplications. If you, O Lord, should mark iniquity, Lord, who could stand? but there is forgiveness with you so that you may be revered. I wait for the Lord. My soul waits, and in his word I hope. My soul waits for the Lord more than those who watch for the morning, more than those who watch for the morning. O Israel, hope in the Lord, for with the Lord there is steadfast love, and with him is greater power to redeem. It is he who will redeem Israel from all its iniquities. Come, Lord Jesus, come. We look forward to returning here next week.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.